Hello, this is Colin here, and today we're going to change the rear shocks on a 2007 Saturn Aura XE. This video is also applicable to Chevy Malibus and Pontiac G6s with years ranging as far as 2004 to 2012. To do this job, you're going to need a few things. You will need two open-end wrenches. I used a 16mm and a 17mm. You'll need a vice grips or a pair of pliers, smaller. Vice grips is preferred. You'll need a regular 3/8 drive ratchet. You'll need a breaker bar. You'll need two torque wrenches, one that goes as low as 18 foot-pounds and one that goes as high as 100 foot-pounds. If you've got one that covers the full range, that'll work. You'll need a couple sockets, 21mm, a 19mm, a 17mm, and a 13mm. You will also need a 3/8 to 1/2 inch drive adapter, and probably a 1/2 inch to 3/8 drive adapter, depending on what size the various sockets are in terms of the drive. You also need a jack and a jack stand, and of course 2 replacement shocks. Let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is break loose your lug nuts before you jack up the vehicle. That'll require a 19mm socket and your breaker bar. Once you've got your lug nuts loosened, you can jack up the vehicle and put it on jack stands. Make sure you put the parking brake on and put a block behind one of your front wheels for safety. Alright, now we can go ahead and get the wheel out of the way. Okay, the next step is to undo the dampener shaft nut. That's actually done through the trunk here, and you have to pull the felt back to kind of get to it. So undo your little cargo net here if you have one, and unscrew the black plastic knobs here that it attaches to pull back the felt. And that back there is the nut you want to undo. Once you've got the felt out of the way, go ahead and take your 17mm ratchet and socket and loosen that top nut. It may spin a little bit on you when you're trying to get it off. If you find that the nut is slipping too much on you, which this one is, you may need to use a pair of vice grips or pliers on the stem while you use a open-end wrench, 17mm, on the nut to get it off. Alright, next you're going to want to undo the bottom shock bolt, and that's a 21mm, and it's really hard to get to with a breaker bar. But see, it kind of depends on where it ended up. You may be able to get. If you can't get any movement on it with your breaker bar, you'll have to resort to regular 8.5 or 3/8 ratchet here, and use a box wrench to cheat. Alright, once you've gotten it loose, you should be able to unscrew it normally. Next you're going to undo the 2 shock mount bolts, and that's done with a 13mm. Okay, now that you've got your old shock out and you've got your new one here, go ahead and take off that top nut, the plates there, and you're going to reuse this component here and put it on your new shock. You can go ahead and take your packaging off this. It will expand as soon as you unclip it. And go ahead and use your provided hardware here to install the plate on top of the new shock. Like so. If you're wondering why I undid this with it in the trunk and not out here where it would appear to be easy to get to, it is technically possible to do it that way. That is to remove this nut out here, but it's a little easier in the back of the car because you can use this plate to kind of hold the shock in place, whereas out here you basically have to stand on it and fight it all the way in. So that's why I did it that way. Alright, that's as much as I'm going to get out here. Let's put it back on the car. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and put the shock back in. Now these are supposed to be torqued to 18 foot-pounds, so grab your torque wrench and finish them off with that. Next we're going to go ahead and reinstall the lower mounting bolt here. Remember to take this washer and put it in between the bottom of the shock and the hub assembly here, or this steering arm assembly here. Okay, now this nut here gets torqued to 89 foot-pounds, so you'll need your larger torque wrench to finish this one off. Alright, next we're going to tighten up that top retaining nut. Now this one's a little tricky because according to the manual it's supposed to be torqued to 52 foot-pounds. Found that to be not a terribly realistic proposition. For one, the shaft spins, and as you can see it's actually spinning right now. I've already got as much as I'm going to get on this. The shaft spins, which prevents you from tightening it past a certain point. And because the nut's recessed, you can't even use a crow's foot on it with a backer to hold the stem, or the pliers to hold the stem there while you tighten it down. So what I found with both of these is I could not get them to 52 foot-pounds, and to be honest, when I took them out, I just took them out with a regular ratchet, so I don't think they were tightened to 52 foot-pounds to begin with. And if you're worried about them coming loose, both my originals and the replacements were a lock nut with the nylon sleeve, and there's Loctite on the stem, so I don't think it's going to come loose, even though it's clearly not at 52 foot-pounds. But just tighten it up the best you can, and it shouldn't be an issue. Once you've got everything tightened up, go ahead and put the felt back in place. And these guys you can pretty much just push on. Last is to torque your lug nuts down to 100 foot-pounds. Well, that's all there is to it. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.